Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. Sue, I hope you're reading this. I didn't start it, I swear. I was simply helping Marina prepare for her audition. She's a neighbor and a friend and an aspiring actress who's trying to get a foot in her door of the terrarium that is the theatrical world of Victoria City. It was a harmless enough task. Just read the other characters' lines, sip your beer, and try not to laugh, because the play is a work of art, no matter how silly the lines sound. And I think I managed quite well, actually. We sat in her living room reading the sides aloud, while rain thrashed against the poor windows and the wind howled somewhere in the vents. Typical Victorian weather. "Prepare to kick the bucket, thou filthy rat of a person," I exclaimed, cringing inside. The lights started flickering. There was nothing unusual about it. Wood utility poles in the area were old than the House of Windsor, and the storm was strong enough to send toddlers and small pets flying. Combine that two facts and you'll be surprised that we still had power. "I'd better get candles," Marina said, going to the kitchen. I thought it was very wise of her and just drank my beer. The power finally did go off. Again, nothing unusual. That's when the cries began. The lingering, unintelligible moans of some sad old person coming from nowhere in particular. Bugger me, I thought, and closed my eyes. How else could I react? It's your turf, Sue. And Alex's too, I guess. You know, I never liked the job. I managed to successfully avoid it for a decade until now. For a moment, I seriously considered leaving, but decided against it. First of all, I live literally next door to Marina's, and most likely I would have heard the stupid cries and stayed involved anyway. And second of all, I like Marina. She's a kind, talented girl who doesn't deserve any of these inconveniences. Marina returned to the living room holding a pack of thin candles and lighter. "What's this noise?" She frowned, searching for the source of the sound that was steadily getting louder. I got up from the couch and told her to leave the candles and get out of the apartment, and shuffled past her into the kitchen. Soon enough, the cries were going to reach the volume of an average AC/DC concert, and then our eardrums would be screwed. The kitchen was as dark as hell pit, but my night vision is naturally pretty good. Occasionally, lightning flashes were also helpful, and combined with the cries, set the right mood for the evening. I found salt, pepper, and a small jar of dry oregano in the second cupboard I opened. That wasn't enough salt, so I pulled a bag of sugar out as well. Marina didn't get out, of course. For some reason, they never do what you tell them to do right away. Instead, she just stood in the middle of the living room, gaping around and covering her ears under the waves of the cursed moans. They were now close to the volume of a bonfire night celebration. I dumped the seasonings on the floor and lit the candles. "My phone's dead," Marina made an impressive attempt to shout over the maddening noise. "What's happening?" "It'll be fine," I yelled back. "Just get out." People often tell me that I make a convincing professional face when I want to. Usually, by that they mean my "I won't take any of this crap" expression when I put my eyebrows in a straight line and make my eyes look both bored and intent at the same time. I guess it works because Marina glanced at me and finally fled to the front door. She tried to unlock it, and when it didn't budge, she desperately threw herself at it a few times. "It's stuck," she spun around, panicking. Now that was somewhat unusual. Sue, you know this, of course. For everyone else, spirits require a significant amount of energy to manifest in our world. Their resources are limited, so naturally it makes sense for them to choose one main channel of manifestation to concentrate on. Typically, visual ghosts don't scream your eardrums off. Tactile ones don't stick out of the wall with their transparent bodies, and audio apparitions don't mess with the doors. This bloke was strong, alright. But strong or not, the first thing to do was to shut him up. The moans were becoming quite unbearable. I gestured to Marina to return to the living room and went about my business. I tore the bag of sugar open and poured a generous heap into the first corner of the room, and then salted and peppered it. Added a bit of oregano on top, and finished the composition with a loonie from my pocket. Looked pretty artistic, if you ask me. "What the hell are you doing?" Marina shouted, staring at me as if I was a lunatic. I just waved her dismissively to let her know that I will explain later, and went to the other corner. There was no point trying to speak over this explicit, ear-splitting noise. A jot of dark, a heap of white, something fragrant, and something bright. As it turned out, I only had 3 coins on me, and I had to use the paperclip from the script for the last corner. It was shiny enough to do the trick. When all the corners were ready, I closed the living room door and poured a thick line of sugar under it to close the gap. The moans subsided immediately, and we both breathed easily. "What was that?" Marina hadn't yet fully recovered from her shock. "An apparition," I said, figuring out the best way to set up the candles. A ghost?" Marina chuckled nervously. I nodded, and she narrowed her eyes at me. "How do you know all of that?" "I had a very long life," I said after a pause. Marina didn't look satisfied with my answer, but she probably realized it was the only one I was willing to give because she didn't inquire further. Instead, she walked to one of my installations in the corner. "What does this do?" she asked, crouching down to take a look at it. "It locks the apparitions in the room with us and temporarily disables it," I replied. "So it's not gone then?" I shook my head. "No, it's still here." The front door being stuck bothered me, but not too much. I figured it would be a powerful old spirit, a rare but not an unheard of situation. "Sue, you and Alex probably saw plenty of that in your old days, huh?" "So what now?" Marina asked, standing up. "Now we find out what it wants," I said, finally deciding on the candle placement, a simple rhombic structure. "Now, Sue, I know that you, being the bookworm-ish pentagram fan that you are, would disagree with me, but I considered the 5-element structure redundant for a simple ritual of communication. And Alex, if there's a small chance of you reading this as well, sod off." I arranged 4 lit candles on the floor in the center of the room and sat cross-legged at the north side of the ROM, facing the door. My bum didn't exactly appreciate the chilliness of the laminated floor, and I really think that the floor heating needs to be a more common thing. "What should I do?" Marina asked. She seemed anxious, clenching and unclenching her fists subconsciously. Not a good sign for a mortal observer. "Just chill," I said lightly. "Have a beer. I think there's some left in my bottle. It'll be over soon." I didn't cheer her up though, but she did sit down on the couch. The downside was she immediately started fidgeting with her right foot at the edge of my peripheral vision. I ignored it for now, at least she didn't get in my way. I placed my palms like an open book on my lap and started chanting the 3rd circle. It's upsetting actually, the ease to which the words came to me, given the effort I made to forget them. For Marina, it was probably a weird scene, me sitting on the edge of her chilly floor and singing ominous Latin gibberish, but she took it all right, and didn't freak out or nagged me with relentless questions. I was soon dying for a cigarette, craving the bitter vapes in my lung and the dry taste of tobacco in my mouth. Smoking helped me tolerate plenty of rituals in the past. It's a shame I quit though. On the 3rd repeat, the moans returned. They weren't as loud as before, but quite noticeable. "Dev?" Marine started worryingly. "Is this normal?" I tried to use my professional face on her again, but it didn't work well with all the chanting I was doing. Marina stood up, evidently distressed. Thankfully though, she didn't freak out completely just yet. Then the symbols began to appear on my palms, burning deep into my skin. They were rough and abrupt, straight lines connected in sharp angles. The words felt ancient, coming from somewhere dark and wet and filled with burning cold. I had no idea what they were saying. It wasn't English, obviously, or even Latin. It wasn't even Sumerian. Not that I'm an expert, as the only thing I can say in Sumerian is, "Excuse me, can you please tell me where the public restroom is?" The smell of burning flesh filled the living room as the symbols on my hands dug deeper. Marina was now circling around, eyeing with increasing fear. "Dev?" She sounded on the verge of panic. "Dev, what's going on?" The hell if I knew. I couldn't stop chanting at this point. I couldn't move a limb or even break the ritual. It simply wouldn't let me. It was no ordinary apparition, audio or multi-channeled. That part was very clear now. The candle's flames fluttered wildly as if we were in the middle of a hurricane. Things started rising in the air. Pages of the script, books, a vase filled with dead roses. The living room door shook under thunderous bangs, and a figure appeared beside the door, flickering sickeningly, and Marina jumped away from it with a deafening shriek. I couldn't blame her. The bloke looked unsettling, thin and old with a face distorted in pain. He sat in a wheelchair, opening and closing his toothless mouth as if he were trying to say something, but all he could hear were the moans. The window behind me suddenly shattered, letting the rain and cold inside. Marina's scream reached an unexpected peak when she looked in that direction and backed away in complete horror. I couldn't move my head, but I was pretty sure that something fucked up was coming in the room from the night outside. That something made me chant louder, almost at the limits of my poor vocal cords. My throat hurt, my ears hurt, and the cacophony of the cries, the banging, Marine's screaming, and my own voice. My hands were burnt. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as the something from outside started crawling towards me. Not very fast though. Thank goodness it took its damn time. Marine had stopped screaming and was forcefully pressing herself against the opposite wall as if she was hoping to just squeeze through it. She clearly couldn't take her eyes off of the thing behind me. I raised my voice a notch, bringing agony to my throat, just to get her attention. And when she finally met my eyes, I darted mine to the candle closest to her, willing her to stop the ritual. She didn't understand at first. All I could do was just repeat the move, stare at her, and then look pointingly at the candle, all in the while feeling that thing get closer to my ass. When I honestly thought I was done for, Marina finally broke herself away from the wall, rushing forward and kicking the bloody candle. It rolled against the floor. The flame went out and I finally regained control over my body and voice. Everything stopped at once. The noises vanished with a pop in my ears. All the flying stuff dropped down. The vase dropped with a shatter, covering the floor with ceramic shards and a splash of water. The flickering old git flickered away. I laid down and decided to stay that way for a bit. The cold lamination didn't bother me that much anymore. If anything, it soothed the burning sensation in my hands. Behind me, the wind mercilessly flapped the curtains around. Marina sank on the floor in front of me, panting. I didn't want to speak ever again. I wanted to close my eyes and drift away. I wanted a cigarette and a retirement plan, and to be as far away from this supernatural shit as possible. As usual, no one really cared about what I wanted, so I sat up and cleared my throat, testing it. And then I took my unfinished beer and drained it in one gulp. It eased the pain a little bit. "Are you alright?" I asked Marina, my voice hoarse and weak like from a few weeks of severe laryngitis. She stammered, swallowed, and started again. "What was that?" What could I say? The first rule of the business is to look confident as possible. Never let a civilian know that you made a mistake or don't have the faintest idea what's going on and why. Well, I had no idea what was going on. It was a mistake to open a two-way communication channel. I decided to ignore the question. "We won't be trying to communicate with the apparition again." I paused, looking at the mess on the floor. "I'm sorry about your window." Marina didn't look like the person who had the energy to care about a broken window. "What was that thing that poured inside?" she asked. It was a good question. I shuffled to the window, and there was no trace of anything except the glass shards on the floor and the pools of rainwater on the windowsill. The storm was still raging outside. The whistling wind threw a handful of raindrops right on my face through the hole. A perfect continuation of the evening. "What did it look like?" I asked, turning to Marine and wiping my face with my palms. The symbols were now fading. I hoped my skin would heal itself soon. It looked like darkness. Marina took a moment to collect her thoughts. Very thick darkness. Total void of light. It poured inside like goo. I nodded. It seems something hijacked the apparition to sneak into our world. I opened a channel to talk to the creature and this thing used it. Tried to use it. I corrected myself. Good job with the candle, by the way. The problem remained, though. If I unlocked the room, the apparition would continue moaning, messing with the doors and whatnot, driving us both insane. That infernal thing gave the spirit enormous power to get my attention and to lure me into performing the communication ritual. It was the first thing I'd ever seen an apparition use a taxi to our world. I didn't even know it was possible. I sighed and rubbed my face. Why was it my problem? I thought that you, Sue, or Alex would handle it much better. I was never good at this. I wasn't even half decent. Most often than not, I was just a brute force keeping civilians away while you two eggheads figured out your spiritual ways. I recognized that it wasn't my bloody luck that made me a part of this. The only solution, as I saw it, was one thing that I was going to do anyway. Get rid of the apparition. It would leave the thing without its one-way ticket. Normally, I would just talk to the spirit, learn what it wanted, and act accordingly. But it wasn't an option, was it? I looked at my palms. The symbols were almost gone. I still had no idea what language that was. Apparently the thing did all the talking. The miserable old git couldn't insert a word, only moan. Marina gave me an exhausted look. Can I leave? She asked. I wish she could. Sorry, I said. I don't think that thing will let you. We need to remove the apparition first. Why me? Marina sounded as if she was holding back tears. The question itself was pointless. I asked it myself thousands of times and no one ever answered. In the current circumstances, however, it made sense. Why Marina? Our building definitely wasn't haunted. I wouldn't live here otherwise. Marina never mentioned that she had any supernatural encounters before, and frankly, she acted just like it was her first time. So a family spirit was out of the question. Is there anything new that you brought home recently? I asked. Anything unusual? She just frowned. How recently? I thought for a moment. Maybe a day or two? She furrowed her brows, trying to think. A pack of beer? I stopped myself from rolling my eyes. I said unusual? Marina shook her head. Nothing. I only went out once in the past 3 days to 7-Eleven. I got the sides yesterday I needed to prepare. We stared at each other for a moment, and then I began to pick up the pages of the script that were now scattered all over the room. Who gave you this gig again? I asked. The agency? Marina got up to her feet. I don't think it was anything to do with this, Dev. Plenty of people should have read the script by now. It's experimental, but it's still on large production, and I didn't hear that anyone else was haunted. Experimental? I said, shaking water off of one of the pages that had fallen near the broken vase. And you're auditioning for the main part? Well, yes I am. Marina sounded a bit defensive. I told you that they lost their female lead and needed someone really quickly. So they pitched you for the leading role. Well, Alex believes I'm a well-suited fit. Marina looked hurt. Who? I froze, picking up the last page. It must have been a coincidence. Alex, the new guy. She suddenly blushed and her eyes dropped. To be fair, I think he has a crush on me. He keeps asking if I had someone to rehearse with. I licked my lips. They felt like they had been brushed by sandpaper. Do you know his full name? Yeah, Marina shrugged. Alexander Munka. My jaw dropped. He didn't even use an alias. The bastard. But then Alex always did consider me stupid. I guess I just proved him right. I leafed through the script, reading more carefully this time. It was no surprise that the dialogue made so little sense. I should have noticed it right away, but the fool that I am, I just read all the pseudo-old English nonsense out loud without giving it a second thought. I was only now that I saw It was only now that I finally saw that some of the words in the male character's lines had been specifically placed to form 2 stanzas of the Grey Gate summoning. They repeated 3 times over the course of the play. I performed the bloody ritual without even realizing what I was doing. I facepalmed myself and stood like that for a while. If Marina or anyone else really had said the stanza, nothing would have happened. But I'm a different matter. Me saying them made the ritual work. Alex targeted me purposefully, Sue. I remember the look on the cunt's face when we saw him last in the night in 1937. I wouldn't put it past him to use me and my friends as tools for his dark renegade out in the pure spite. I'm pretty sure, Sue, that you're next. Dev? I flinched. I'd completely forgotten that Marina was still there. We were back to square one. An unwanted ghost, a frightened civilian, and me, probably the most unsuitable person to deal with it. I had to banish the apparition. I know what you'll say, Sue. It was unethical. There would be no wholesome story for the moaning bloke, no fulfilling purpose or finished immortal deeds. But that was the whole problem. He had none of those. He just happened to be the closest apparition when I read the Grey Gates. I dragged him into the world, making him a perfect ride for whatever Alex was trying to unleash. Do you smoke? I asked Marina. She shook her head. Of course she didn't. Why did I even quit? It's not like I'm going to die of lung cancer anyway. All right, I said. It's going to be a messy, but don't panic. Cover your ears, and if you fear blood, look away. Marina frowned. Wait a minute. But I already opened the living room door and smudged away sugar, which brought back the moans. I needed a knife, preferably an obsidian one, but beggars can't be choosers. Oh, the thing knew exactly what I was doing the moment I pulled the chef knife out of the knife block. It knew, and it wanted to destroy me. The moans became howls. The lightning struck outside, and I barely managed to duck when another knife flew at my face with vicious speed. Most of them hit the refrigerator, leaving visible dents in the metal, and dropped onto the tile floor. The steak knife nearly cut off my ear before it got stuck in the wall, wobbling slightly. All hell broke loose around me. Drawers and cabinet doors burst open and their contents flew out. I covered my head and ran, dodging flying cutlery and dishes. I was almost in the hallway when the cursed toaster got me between the shoulder blades. Now that hurt. In the living room, Marina was crouched behind the couch, covering her eyes huge and round and completely terrified. But despite all the horror, she was still trusting me, trusting that I would be capable of fixing it all. I guess she had no choice after all. The candles went off. There was no time nor need to light them again. I slashed my right palm as deep as I could, making the moaning old git scream in agony. An armchair rose into the air, moving chaotically towards me. I dipped my index and middle finger into the wound and began to draw a pentagram on the laminate floor with blood, chanting the last 2 stanzas of the Grey Gates. Marina shrieked, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the old git flickering next to me. He was moving now, stretching his scrawny, pale hands towards my shoulder. I felt his freezing touch. I was moving my hand as fast as I could, blood running down my arm. The pentagram was done. I had to draw the runes around it now. And above me, the armchair was getting uncomfortably close. If it landed on my head, it would be much more painful than the toaster. The fingers grabbed my t-shirt. I felt the force dragging me away from the pentagram, tearing my sleeves, but I had already put the runes in their place. The last words of the 3rd round of the chanting rang in the air and everything stopped. I barely managed to roll over to the side to escape it. The room was in havoc. I don't think there was a single thing left undamaged now. Marina was exceptionally pale, and we just sat there in silence until the neighbors started banging on the front door. I don't particularly want to talk about the very unpleasant conversation with our landlords that followed, or the cleaning, or the bills for the damaged property. Suffice to say, Marina doesn't want to hang out with me as much as before. Alex vanished again. There's no trace of him in Marina's agency, which brings me to this post. Sue, I hope you're reading it, and it's not too late. I have no other means to reach out to you. I have no idea what Alex is trying to bring into the world, but He must be stopped. And I'm not the right guy for the mission. So please, Sue, if you're reading this, you have to stop Alex.